So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do a more human style outfit, at least like from my thought process. I'm going to try and make it realistic, so this is kind of how I make a realistic face. And once I've picked my skin tone, which for this one, like a light skin tone will work fine for me, but you can pick whatever you want. So I'm just going to demonstrate on a light skin tone. If you do decide to pick a darker one, just make the colors either slightly lighter than your skin tone or slightly darker, depending. I'm just going to start with the eyes. So in a lot of realistic outfits, you'll see male eyes being used from me, from other creators, or if they do use female ones, usually it won't be ones that look, for example, like this, that look kind of cartoonish. I like these eyes, but for realistic looks, they're not kind of like go-to eyes, just because they do look a bit cartoonish. For example, if you want to use this makeup here, it kind of adds like a depth under your eye, like we have in real life. Another thing that adds depth around the eyes, which I use in literally every outfit, is this eyeshadow right here. This here, if you put it to your skin tone, but just like a little bit lighter, you can see it sticks out here and adds a shadow above the eye as well. So it gets rid of that flat look. Now you can see it looks like they're inside the head. And you can swap which way you put these, because for example, sometimes if you want like a smoky eye makeup look, this can look better. But if you don't and you just want it to look a bit more natural, you can use this eyeshadow on top. Now it does look a little bit weird so far, so we'll add a nose just to make it look more normal. For noses, anywhere around the skin tone, and with this one, you want to put it about here if you don't want it to have this red glow, and if you don't want it to have like this black line that you start to see appear here, and then it just gradually gets like darker and darker. If you don't want any of them, you want it around here. So around this area is like a good area. You can like see a tiny little mark here, but again, if you put it any brighter, you get this redness around the nose again. So I like having it around here. After we've done that, I like to pick the main contour. So for some human outfits, particularly like darker skinned outfits, I like using this and taking it to, for example, somewhere like this, so you get to see this redness, brownness. I can't tell exactly where it is on the color wheel without using the darker skin, so it might look a bit different. Yeah, somewhere like here would be good for darker skin tones. And then if you add this here, this highlight, where is it? To the bottom. If you add this just lighter than your skin tone, if it's a dark skin tone, it will start to add a lot of depth. As you can see, even though this is like a light skin tone, if I'm doing it like this, you can already see it kind of looks more natural. But anyway, so I'm gonna do it for a light skin tone. So for a light skin tone, I want it like this, so it's like a bit lighter than the actual skin. So you can see there's a difference between these two. It kind of fades, and as long as it's not too harsh, it will look good. There are obviously some exceptions. For example, if you're doing cultural outfits for, say, just off the top of my head, I can think of Chinese traditional outfits. The face is it's like white makeup, so you can have this really white. Again, it just depends on the outfit. So I'm gonna change the contour now to something I would use. You can use this, because the hair will cover a lot of this redness depending on which hair you pick. So yeah, it just depends really. And then with this highlight that I added on top, if you drag it to the bottom of the makeup, it just allows every other feature to be seen still. And then next I like to pick the eyebrows. For eyebrows, most of the time I just pick these. As long as they're colorable and like a decent shape. For example, these. Or these. Yeah, when I'm coloring the eyebrows, you want to kind of have an idea of maybe what color hair you're going to have, and have it a little bit lighter than the hair. So if I was going for blonde hair, I'd have maybe something like this, so you can still see the eyebrows, but they're blonde, because in real life your eyebrows usually match your hair color. But anyway, for this one I'm going to have dark hair, I think, so something like this will look good. Next is the lips. This is definitely my least favorite part of making outfits. So again, if you want to make realistic faces, male lips can be really good, just because of the size and the shape. It's very like a natural look. It's not too, for example, it's not too like plump and pouting, so it just looks a lot more realistic. Because realistically, you're not going to be walking around with your lips like this 24/7. I love some of the other male lips, but they just don't, like, they don't really color very well if they've already got the shade. Like, for example, this is already like red, so it's hard to get it to color properly. Unless it's like, yeah, unless you're doing like blue or any of these colors. So for example, for these lips, when I'm doing non-human outfits, I love using them as well because they color very well if you have like a different color. So blue, green, you can see it goes very blue, very green. For humans, you want it to be, for example, like this kind of blends in with the cheeks, so this would be okay. But something like this stands out in the wrong way because it's too orange. Like it doesn't tie in with the rest of the face. So if you notice, it kind of stands out. It doesn't look very realistic. So we want to change the lip color to something that's a little bit darker. And for example, I always say ignore the hex codes because some things don't color the same, and I notice this a lot with lips and a lot of other items. If you're coloring the lips and you see, for example, here the lips, they look pretty good, but then on here you have this weird like sandy kind of color, and you'll think, well, that's not pink, so why is it there? But no, you just trust what you see more than the hex code. Or for example, you can have even blue lips sometimes, like a shade of this blue here. That looks fun. Like that could look decent depending on what skin color you're using. But then if you look where it is on the color wheel, you might second guess yourself, and I do that sometimes too. But you just have to stop and get in the habit of trusting what you see more than the actual, even the color wheel itself. Anyway, to actually color the lips now, I'm gonna use something like this. And now with these lips, I know I keep rambling so much, but the lighter you make them, you can see this highlight start to stand out. And if you make them too dark like this, they start looking like they're like crusty and dry and like chapped, because this here is darker than the actual lips. So you want it to be not too dark. Though if you're going for like a gothic look, this can look good because it can look just like kind of like a matte lipstick kind of look. So anyway, something like this is going to be fine for me. If you want to add more texture to the face when making a realistic outfit, I recommend using something like this. These freckles here. And if this is too freckly for you, then I would move it below the highlight, because you can still see some of the texture, but it's just not as visible. And if that's not enough for you, you can always make the freckles darker to see them stand out more. And I like how this looks. This looks pretty good to me. And then for the last makeup slot, you can use, sometimes I like using blush, it depends, and you can make it darker to kind of, you can see the difference. Yeah, it just kind of darkens the area, or you can brighten it up. If I don't use blush, sometimes I'll use, say if I want to add makeup, you can add the makeup. But most of the time when I'm doing realistic faces, I don't really add makeup to it, to be honest. So I'm just gonna not. Oh, another tip is, sometimes if you've got enough space, say for example, if I like how this looks and I don't want to add anything else to it, sometimes you can add another nose. And I've just said you don't want to add anything to it, but if you add another nose, you'll see what I mean. It builds up the shape. So for example this, and you can swap it around. Do you see how much more realistic it looks? It adds more depth here. It adds like a better shape because it combines both of them. But then for example, if I delete this and then I add even this looks good, I like it. But then if I add, for example, a male nose, we'll go for this one, you can see on some of them it starts to overlap. You won't really notice this if you're far away, but it's just something to look out for if you are bothered. But I still think this looks quite realistic, really. So yeah, just always remember that you can use male and female features. So I'm gonna go for this nose here because I like how this looks. I think I'm gonna make the eyebrows just a little bit darker. So like this. And then for the hair, we can do whatever we want for hair, really. I'm not quite sure because I don't really have like a theme in mind to make the hair easier to kind of do. So I'm just going to do anything that comes to mind. I like this hair, but with only bangs as like a base. And then I like using, for example, this. I'm obviously not coloring this yet. This layers quite well with it. And maybe sometimes this. And with only bangs. Just to, you can make these look a little bit lighter. And then to color it, we want kind of darkish hair, so for a brown, I'm gonna color it about there. And I think this brown looks nice. It's not too light and doesn't look too like dead hair, so we'll use this brown. And then, for example, I did say I don't use hex codes. Sometimes if I want the hair to match a lot, I'll paste the hex code and then just make it slightly lighter there. And then, for example, paste the hex code again, just for the hair. And then we make it slightly darker. And then you can see it's very like uniformed, but it also has like shadows to show where the hair strands are different. And then for this one, we'll just go for the, let's see, maybe the lighter one in this one. And then for our last hair, we'll just do the same. And then so far, this is how it looks. And I know these eyes, there are more realistic ones. For example, if we go to masculine, we can change it to something like this. You can also add closed eyes. It can still look very realistic. For example, here the face is a lot more realistic than for example the DTI preset kind of looks. Yeah, and she has closed eyes, so closed eyes can work as well. So this is like my style of realistic face, but there are plenty of different styles, and there's plenty of other creators that do it in many different ways. They all look amazing, but this is kind of my process. So yeah.